Says it's taken 15 seconds, but we're live.
We are live, hopefully.
Is anyone here though? We're live. We've got 26 people. Increasing. Hi, everybody. And thank you so much for joining us this evening. It's a horrible rainy day in Chester. You can hear the rain hammering on the windows. And yeah, thank you for giving up your evening to talk about renters' rights. So we've got some slides that we're going to share with you. You must forgive us. This is the first time John and I have ever done a webinar. And so even just the software has completely foxed us.
The software is a bit different, isn't it? So
it is.
We've had a bit of a dry run earlier on. We're in our lovely office. Our phones are on silent. There was a bus honking outside. There's doors slamming. But we're hoping for minimal interruptions. And hopefully the technology will hold out as well. So I think it's only fair that we get started promptly, I guess.
Yeah, let's go. So are the slides working, Johnny? So yeah, this is our Currans Homes Renters' Rights Bill webinar. I'm Lisa and I'm part of the team here in Chester. I'm joined tonight by my husband.
Need to squeeze in a little bit.
All right, squeeze in. Got me off camera. Joined tonight by John. Whether you're a long-time landlord or just starting out or somewhere in between, it's designed this to make you more confident, more compliant and more prepared for what's going to be coming down the track. We're going to split the evening into two sections. The first will be a quick market update, what's happening across the housing and the rental sectors right now. And then we're going to look at the probably the reason that you've logged on tonight, which is the Renters' Rights Bill. It's been long awaited. It was first talked about in 2022, and we're going to talk about what's changing, how it affects you, and how you can stay ahead of the curve with that. We'll also be answering questions. So if I can ask if anyone's got any questions, please do pop it in the chat. I can see we've got some chat going already. Yeah. Hi, everybody.
Don't be afraid. I mean, I think, as Lisa said, there's Q&A at the end. But as we go through and touch on some topics, and maybe we'll talk about things like arrears, if anybody feel free to put anything that resonates or any general comments, feel free to put those in the chat. That would be useful. And then we'll sweep up at the end with a general Q&A. The only thing is we're having to sit further back from the screen, so we might keep leaning in just to read some of the comments, but thank you.
So the agenda, what we're going to cover tonight, we'll cover the market update, what's happening right now. We're going to cover renters' rights, what's changing, and we do now have some timescales on that, so that will also be good. What you can do right now to make sure you stay compliant and prepared. I know there are a number of self-managed landlords on here, and yes, if you, it'd be good to know what to do there. We're also going to talk about the live Q&A. So let's get.
That's just on that. I mean, I think we'll try and keep the sales pitch to a minimum to a certain extent, but I guess we're holding this webinar with two hats on. One is clearly owners of an estate agency and a letting agent, but also as landlords ourselves. So I think, there's some messages there which will hopefully again resonate for all landlords, not just managed landlords, for own landlords. We made some calls over the last couple of weeks, didn't we? And had the team make some calls to a lot of our clients and let-only landlords. And it was a surprise to see that out of those calls, there was a good number of people who had heard of and understood renters' rights, but there's also quite a big number of people who really didn't know much at all. So hopefully this is of use.
And I think nationally, 84% of landlords are self-managed.
Yeah.
And so, yes, it is the greatest majority. And I think about 50% of those have never heard of renters' rights. And of course, it is arguably the biggest aim to hit this sector.
That's a big number when you think that I think we've got in a private rented centre, something like 11 million tenancies and something like 2 or 2.5 million landlords. that's a lot of landlords who probably don't really understand what's coming down the line. So talking
Totally.
big numbers.
And the world's changed massively. I mean, you know, we thought we'd talk a little bit about the history of our business. It was set up by my sister Jackie in 1989. And, you know, back then the world was completely different. Many of you won't even remember it. Some of you may not even have been alive then. But, you know, it was so different then. And back then I was at university, first year of university. And I would come and help out Jackie in my holidays and things, and the world was completely different. And then 21 years ago, John and I bought that business from my sister. My sister very kindly agreed to stay on for 5 years while we had our children. But again, the world was so massively different.
Yeah,
then,
but let's remember why we actually bought the business. And I think, again, just a kind of a word on we could cover it anyway. You know, there's probably lots of sources of information, lots of different webinars, lots of different estate agents that people can speak to. Sometimes you go and deal with an estate agent and you're buying a home from somebody who may not even own their own home.
Yeah.
We're homeowners, but more importantly, we are landlords. We've been landlords for 28 years, I think. So we've built up a reasonable portfolio of rental properties, residential and commercial properties in the Chester area. So a lot of things we're going to talk about, and again, you know, the things that we're going to talk about in terms of getting ready and the things you need to understand, we're coming at that not just from an agent but from a personal perspective as landlords. So
these are the things absolutely that we are checking ourselves. Yeah, so it's sharing that intel. Yeah.
And your point where you were going to was, you know, part of the reason why we actually bought this business 21 years ago. We had a number of rental properties at the time. Your sister was selling, and our first reaction was, who on earth's going to let our properties out?
Yeah, totally.
So, you know, but I think we've got a number of properties, but actually the thought of self-managing is quite scary. You know, we've got a whole team of people that manage our properties for us, but we're still into the detail.
Yeah, absolutely. But of course, you know, back when we bought the business, compliance was literally you didn't even have to have a gas safety check. And of course, now there are hoops and hoops and hoops. There's so much compliance. And that brings me on to, you know, if you are a self-managed landlord, it might make sense that you have a free compliance health check. And the reason for that is we will go through the compliance and make sure that you are completely compliant. Of course, we do that when we set up a tenancy, but then you're pretty much on your own. So if you do want us to help with that, I think that would be a really, really good idea. That's something I would absolutely suggest people do. But this is a picture just taken a few days ago of our current team. It was taken on the Raymond streets, just off Grosvenor Street there. And we have been around since 1989. And yeah, we cover all sorts.
And our lettings team, probably some of our longest standing members, certainly in Chester, been with us for many years, and understand our landlords, understand the legislation. That said, they are still going to go through a programme of education over the coming months. They've already done quite a lot of that. And the same goes for our landlords, our team over in Wales. They've obviously had Rent Smart Wales for quite some time. So it's a slightly different position over there.
Yeah. And just on that, we are organised slightly different to a lot of other letting agents. When you deal with our business, you deal with one person. So that person is a portfolio manager and they deal with everything in relation to your tenancy. So it's not someone does maintenance, someone does paperwork, someone does compliance. It's all in one, just so that from a customer experience, it's as seamless as it can be. So yeah, we'll move on from that. So let's talk a little bit about the market.
Yeah, so before we get deep into renters' rights, let's just talk about the property market in general. So this is just a couple of minutes just to talk about more of a sales perspective, I suppose. So just move on if you can, Lisa. So where are we at the moment? Looking at the Rightmove stats for September, average asking prices rose by 0.4%, so not particularly exciting. Puts a national average house price at 370,000, but prices are still 0.1% lower than this time last year, and that's pretty significant. This is the first annual dip since January, and for us on the sales side, it just shows that there's far more realistic pricing going on versus a couple of years ago, where people could almost, it was very much a seller's market. It's very much a buyer's market at the moment. So buyers are still active, but it's incredibly price sensitive. Why does it matter for landlords? It matters because as landlords with a portfolio of properties, clearly we have one eye on capital appreciation. So values are very important to us over time. It's very important that that market continues to move forward, and just overall confidence in terms of people either buying, selling, investing, or moving in general. So that's why that's important for us. If you think about North West Cheshire, North Wales, so that's more of a regional picture. Properties are still relatively affordable. Asking prices are up just 3% annually, and that's very much how we see it here in Chester. But that said, we know there are certain hotspots. So certain hotspots in and around Chester, Heswall in particular, where we're just about to open a new office, and North Wales, traditionally places like Harden, and then Cheshire Villages. Tarpley's always been popular. So there are still hotspots, even though I mentioned before, it's very much a buyer's market. You'll find small hotspots around.
We do. Great homes in great areas will always keep going up, won't they?
And then in terms of mortgage rates and just some words on that. So as we know, we've had some downward movements since the first base rate cut back in August 2024. Affordability slightly improved. 2-year fixed rates now, they've dropped from 5% to around 4.5%, saving buyers roughly about £100 a month. And that has led to some increased confidence, certainly amongst first-time buyers. Again, we see that in the sales market. Whilst the higher end of the market has been more challenging over the last few months, our general sales business, our core sales business, has been incredibly busy. And yeah, a lot of that is driven by first-time buyers. Local movers, sales agreed are up about 5% year on year. So I would say things are steady and healthy, and kind of a sign of a fairly resilient market. What does it mean for landlords? So a steady market is good news. It means that we don't have kind of shocks and jolts and surprises, albeit we have the budget upcoming, which we probably won't talk about in a great deal. I think we've probably second guessed ourselves to death when it comes to the budget. But again, clearly as landlords, we are all waiting to see what that means. If I think about Cheshire, Wirral, North Wales, in general, people are renting for longer. And that's from an affordability perspective, a lifestyle perspective. More professionals are relocating north for work. We've seen that trend for quite a few years, both rental and sales. And again, which has meant that rental demand is strong. We're not seeing huge void periods either.
No.
So it's a good, strong market where we are in the Northwest.
Yeah, definitely is. Very, very interesting year it's been for landlords. So the rental market right now, just leading on from that, the average rents have risen again by £400 per month. So in the Northwest, North Wales, it's not unusual. Well, the average rent is £950 to £1,100. Growth has cooled very slightly, with rental inflation around 4% year on year, much more sustainable than what we were seeing post-pandemic. But not slowing, but stabilising. Stock levels are up at 10 to 12% year on year, and tenant demand has eased a little, but remains well above the pre-pandemic levels. On average, each property gets between 10 to 12 inquiries. Now, before the pandemic, that was closer to 5. So it's a much more balanced, predictable market, less frantic, but still very, very healthy for well-prepared landlords. So one of the biggest trends right now is affordability. Rents have risen faster than wages, and about 1 in 4 listings are being reduced before let. Roughly 45% of landlords report some level of rent arrears this year. So strong referencing and rent protection in many cases are really essential.
Yeah, and I think, again, this might be something for the chat, just as a bit of interest, if people feel comfortable in doing it. I look at the 45% number. I suspect that is a little bit more national than regional.
Yeah.
So that feels high for where we are in the Northwest. But I would say that we have spoken to more landlords recently who have started to have conversations about rent arrears. And again, that just goes into Lisa's point around the importance of knowing your tenant, understanding your tenant, and being selective. That might become harder when it comes to renters' rights that we're going to talk about. But I think understanding who is moving in and getting a picture of them up front is more vital than ever because of the affordability pressures.
Yeah, definitely. And their intentions. I think, understanding, I think that's one of the things that that is very important to us when we're moving a tenant in. It's not just understanding can they afford the rent, but how long do they want to stay? What are their reasons for moving to Chester if they're here for a period of time? It's almost getting behind some of the numbers. It's no longer just about putting a number through a spreadsheet and letting a computer say yes or no. So what are we going to talk about now? Where are we?
So I think that's it. That's
right.
it for the
Yeah.
kind of market update from a high level perspective. Let's get into some of the meat of it in terms of why we're here tonight. So Renters' Rights Bill, as Lisa said at the beginning, it does feel like we've been talking about this for an awfully long time, 2022. So for many years, and there's been lots of false starts, second guesses. Excuse me, sorry.
I mean, it started, didn't it? It was the Renters Reform Bill originally, and then it got amended, it got debated, it got renamed. Then 27th of October last month, it came out, the royal assent came out and it became law. And now we've got some idea, just the last few days, we've got some idea on what the timescales are going to look like.
Yeah, and just as we get into that, I mean, what Lisa and I were very, very conscious of with this presentation, there are lots of scare stories out there. There's a little bit of fear, uncertainty, and doubt, as you can imagine. So we're going to try and steer clear of kind of catastrophizing what may or may not happen to landlords, and try and keep it reasonably straight. But I think over time, I think it'll be interesting to see. Certainly, when I lie in bed at night, I can think about scenarios that may be incredibly challenging, but we'll try and not be too heavy on that as we go through it. Make no bones about it. This is the biggest reforms that we've seen in 35 years. We saw Rent Smart Wales a few years ago, but as I said a little while ago, the market here in England is 11 million tenancies and 2 million landlords. So it is a big impact.
Yeah, and it's going to impact all tenancies. So it will be not just new tenancies, all existing tenancies will need documentation. We will get guidance on that. We believe January. Let me show you the timescale. Oh, actually, we'll quickly run through this. So what do we need to know? It will be the end of Section 21, so there'll no fault evictions. There will be no fault evictions anymore. New decent home standard for all rentals. There'll be a landlord database, and all landlords that are self-managed will need to have an ombudsman membership, and that will be mandatory. There'll be significant fines if that is not adhered to. There'll be enhanced tenant rights and pets in lets measures introduced, and the rent reviews will be limited to one every 12 months strictly via a Section 13. And then there will be stronger enforcement and council penalties. So the timeline looks like this. Royal assent has been granted on the 27th of October. 2 months after that date will be the first milestone. And that is where I can never say this word, can I? Investigatory, there we go, I did it. Measures for local authorities, and many local authorities are already recruiting for and preparing for that. Then on the 1st of May will be the tenancy reform measures. Guidance on that, we believe, are going to come out on around the 1st of January. And then towards the end of 2026, there will be the landlord ombudsman and the new private sector rental database created.
Yeah, and just a few extra things on that, I suppose. I mean, that timeline, there's a more detailed timeline if anyone's interested. So this timeline was taken from a roadmap. So the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, you can find this on the government website. They produced a document recently called Implementing the Renters' Rights Act 2025, and that's our roadmap for reforming the private rented sector. So that breaks down some further milestones along that, the one you see on screen. Some of that's just about communication, building up capacity in local authorities and things like that. And also it goes on, for more consultations around decent homes and AWAB's law and things like that, which might take many, many years to consult on. But I think the most important thing on this slide is probably the first thing that we will really see as landlords is the 1st of May. That's the tenancy reform measures. That's the stuff really that we need to be taking action on now.
Yeah.
Right, on cue. Somebody phoning.
Your brother's calling you, John.
Okay, yeah, I can wait to speak to my brother. So,
so this is the headline change. This is the end of no fault evictions. Landlord will still be able to regain possession for valid reasons. So if they want to sell, if they want to move back in, or if a family member wants to move back in, and it does specify the type of family members. So I believe cousins and nieces and nephews will not be possible, but brothers and sisters and parents, children will. And so also arrears and also breach of tenancy. But the process will take longer, much longer. It will go through courts, and we know that the courts are already jammed. So I expect that this is going to get much longer. Some people predict that could be up to a year to regain possession, and it will require much more documentation. And we're already quite a lot of documentation if you do have to go to court.
Those grounds to gain possession, I think, are important, and that's probably something we'll cover on a bit more detail in a future webinar, because there are quite a number of grounds. You've mentioned one around possession for family members. There's also one around possession to if you need to sell your home.
Yes.
Well, but again, there's some complications in that. So you may then also have to provide evidence that you're taking your home to the market.
Yes.
If you do gain possession on those grounds, I think there's a limitation then of 12 months before you're able to re-let your property or bring it back to the rental market.
Yes,
so you need to be serious about that.
Yeah.
These are things which will be monitored, and I think there'll be implications for landlords who try to maybe bend the rules in some of those instances. But I think the big thing for me is probably around timescales. So, it's probably going to be or will be very important for landlords to think ahead in terms of when they want to rent their property out and gain possession of that property.
Yeah, definitely. A notice to sell or move back in increases to the first 12 months of a tenancy will be protected. And so the earliest, if a tenant moves into a property, the earliest time that you can send out the section 2 of notice is on month 8. And so there is a 12-month commitment. Now, that's not to say that by arrangement with the tenant it couldn't happen sooner, but again, that's where I think intentions for accidental landlords will be very, very important, to understand what the tenant wants and what they truly want, and to make sure that you don't fall short of that.
And where this goes back to is, I guess this is the key part of renters' rights, isn't it? There's a clue in the title here. This is primarily about rights for renters.
Yes.
There are some words, if you look at the government documentation, there are some words about how this does help landlords who are compliant, but I think it's much weaker than the argument for renters. And this is about people being able to enjoy their home and have some security. So we no longer will we have that assured short-hold tenancy. Everything becomes a periodic.
Yes.
And effectively, tenants can live there as long as they wish, subject to the grounds, some of them that we've just talked about there. Now, again, I said I'd avoid maybe some of the catastrophizing, but I can think of some examples in our business where you've got accidental landlords, or you might have landlords who maybe are moving away temporarily for work or a very extended holiday, and they in the past have been able to maybe secure a tenancy for 6 months,
yes,
knowing that they could easily come back at the end of that 6 months and then take possession of their property again. Now, that's going to be clearly a lot more challenging. Landlords will have to think ahead about what their intentions are, what their timescales are, and you can even start to wind that forward and think about. And this is where I've been listening to some podcasts and videos recently. We used to at one point had some involvement in some holiday accommodation, and what we found was towards the end of that involvement, we did see a succession of I guess kind of medium-term stays where you would have maybe contractors come into the area for a month or two,
yes,
and it was far easier for them to take an Airbnb or a serviced accommodation property. Now, in effect, if a tenant was to rent a property, they could give notice, move in, give notice, and move out 2 months later.
Yes.
So that, to me, seems a very simple way of getting quite a relatively cheap 2-month accommodation.
Yes.
And again, without catastrophizing, the example I heard was, you could go and have a very nice holiday in a coastal resort rather than rent a hotel or an Airbnb. You could have a rental property for 2 months. Now, clearly, if someone builds up a history of doing that as a tenant, that's probably the kind of thing that would be uncovered when it came to referencing.
Yes.
But again, these are the kind of things that I think it'll be interesting to see how things pan out in the future, about whether there's abuse either side in terms of those grounds for possession, or maybe tenants who are just not wanting to stay long term.
Yep, definitely.
Okay, so pets, repairs and property standard. Pets in lets, I love that. So tenants can request pets. So they'll have a right to request. Landlords, they must justify any refusal. I think there's a 28-day period there where landlords have to be able to provide that justification, and they can't reasonably deny But what they can do is require an additional level of pet insurance. So there's a few things there, I suppose. One is, I guess, from a managing agent's perspective, I can see us playing an important part in managing that those discussions and those requests, and helping to provide a justification.
Yes.
And at the very least, guiding on maybe additional levels of insurance for pets to protect against damage for landlords.
Yeah.
And then property standards, I touched a little bit on that before. So that is sort of AWAB's law, which again may take longer in terms of the consultation for that.
Yeah. Under the bill, rent can only be increased every 12 months, and it must be justified, and no more than market value. So I think the comparables here will be absolutely vital. There are a number of self-managed landlords who do not want to increase rents, but when we've been doing calls out to our self-managed landlords, we are asking them whether they do want to do this before this bill is passed, because there's no two ways about it. It's going to be way trickier after the fact. It's going to be strictly every 12 months, and comparables, I think, will be absolutely vital. You won't be able to do a rent increase without a Section 13. The process will be mandatory.
And there needs to be a notice period for issuing, I think, a Section 13,
yeah,
2 months, isn't there?
2 months now, so you have to give 2 months notice. I think one of the most disappointing aspects of the renters' rights is that, unfortunately, the agents and landlords have appealed that if a tenant does, and this is free of charge, if they do go to a tribunal, if they do dispute the rent, unfortunately, if it finds in the landlord's favour, it will not be backdated, and the process is free of charge. So I think there will be many tenants who, if sometimes particularly between landlord and tenant, there can be fractious relationships. Often if you've got an agent between, they can tend to diffuse it, but it can get quite fractious. And I think if you do get into that scenario, if it goes to tribunal and it's fines in the landlord's favour, then the increase only happens after the tribunal, and that is likely to take quite a number of months.
Yeah.
And so, unfortunately, this is one of the very disappointing aspects of the bill, I think.
And you said it, we might come back to it at the end in terms of getting ready, but again, never cease to be amazed at the conversations we have with landlords who've had long-standing tenants and are incredibly comfortable to leave the rent levels as they currently stand. I think that's noble. I'm just not sure that's will serve people well, certainly landlords in the future, and to a certain extent, tenants, need to, if they decide to move on in the future, they need to understand what market rent looks like.
Quite often that, they don't want to move on because, of course, they're paying a very often a very small amount monthly, and unfortunately it doesn't work for them either, because they've not been living in a real scenario. So it can be quite painful to have to be involved in some of those things, because it's a real lose-lose situation often. Although the tenants love it in the short term, in the long term it can be quite painful for them.
And I think, again, we'll come back to it, but I think I think we've got a big part to play as agents, and what we are particularly good at is having that market data, understanding what properties, what the going rate, the market rate is for properties. When we value a property for a landlord, we have access to comparables.
Yes.
We have real information about what people are paying, and I think collating that information and having that up front, using that as for the discussion with the tenant and landlord, hopefully will mitigate a lot of these ongoing tribunal discussions, which may happen in the absence of data and supporting information.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Okay, anti-discrimination measures. So we shouldn't discriminate. That's an absolutely sensible point to make. When it comes to tenants on benefits or tenants that have children or pets. So again, that is very noble. And we must reasonably consider tenants in all cases. The reality is clearly there is often competition for rental properties, as Lisa mentioned earlier on, and it is up to the agents working with landlords to help to identify the best possible tenants for that property.
Yes.
But certainly no active overt discrimination, which again is absolutely sensible.
Landlord compliance risks. So this is where non-compliance really starts to carry a real financial risk. Tenants can now claim up to 24 months of rent back for certain offences, and the range of offences is expanding. So including not joining the new landlord database, councils will also have much stronger powers in relation to prosecution, identifying and prosecuting non-compliant landlords. So at the moment, that cost is in the region of £5,000. Well, it is £5,000 per issue, but it is going up to £7,000 if you're not compliant per non-compliant. So it can be multiple £7,000 after this bill is passed. And so the council seem to be employing enforcement teams, and of course this is potentially taking place from the end of this year.
Yeah, and this is, I guess, where the majority of the scare stories I think that you may see as landlords. This is probably some of the headline grabbing numbers. So you've mentioned 7,000. I've seen numbers up to £40,000. And again, we need to see where this goes. I think what I would say is, again, about wanting to catastrophize too much. And this again came out of a webinar that I listened to recently. Anecdotally, hearing that because a lot of these claims from a tenant's perspective are effectively no cost claims, some of the a tenant has a right to reclaim some of that rent, even if they've moved out of the property.
Yeah.
And anecdotally hearing that there may be almost a legal lots of companies setting up as a kind of a no win, no fee basis. So you'd hate this to be another PPI type exercise or a Dieselgate scandal, but clearly in all these circumstances there's an opportunity maybe for more unscrupulous companies and tenants to attempt to recover rent, because we're talking quite big numbers. And if that's an easy process, i.e. no win, no fee to follow, then that's probably the thing that keeps me awake slightly as a landlord. But that is, again, that's for good landlords who are compliant. That shouldn't be an issue. This database that Lisa talked about, so there's a couple of aspects there. I think that's going to be interesting as well. I think there will be an annual fee to register your details. That will be to be confirmed. You will have to register your property details, your contact details as a landlord, and also things like EPCs and electrical and gas compliance. Now, again, we might come back to this in terms of getting ready, but if you have a portfolio of properties, there's clearly an amount of work to do to gather all that information together, and that will be absolutely vital. There was talk of public access to this system. That won't necessarily be public access to private landlord information. It's more about tenants having access and understanding which properties are compliant and have a track record of compliance. I also think that, again, hearing that when that database does become live, there will be a window where landlords or their agents will have to register. And obviously with 2 million landlords and 11 million properties, someone compared it to trying to get Oasis tickets in terms of the traffic and the activity for registering all that data in a short space of time. But hopefully there'll be a grace period that goes along with that too.
Yeah. So preparing for the change. I know it can sound a bit daunting, especially if you're self-managing, but there's lots of time to prepare for the change. And I think now it's time to just review your tenancy agreements, have a little look at rents before the new bill lands. We've been calling out to our self-managed to ask, would you like us to do an inspection? Would you like us to do a rent increase? I think both of those things are really, really valid before this comes about. There will be paperwork beginning of next year as well. I would also suggest there is a button on the webinar here. If you do want a compliance check, click the button and we will make time to make sure that you are compliant at this moment. It then means that you're in the best possible shape to react to what's happening down the line.
And just picking up on a couple of those things. So again, the tenancy agreements is for existing tenancies. They will remain in place. You or we as agents or you as landlords will need to issue an information sheet, a government information sheet, and for new tenancies, there will be a number of clauses that will be in those tenancy agreements. I don't think we've had sight of those yet. So there's a paperwork exercise here as well when we get to May. Yeah.
And interesting, you know, one of the things that many of the people that I've spoken to are now keen on is rent protection. It's not something that we'd considered doing years ago, but it's definitely something that we are doing now. And there are some really good rent protections out there. One of the policies that I looked at in the last few months is a policy that will also cover against HMRC inspections. So yes, it will cover rent protection, but it will also, as a landlord, give you additional protection, which could be quite interesting. So I think it's wonderful that the market has reacted in the way that it has and are supporting us in the way that it can.
Yeah. I think there was some slides on one of the earlier slides. I think the best way to think about that is rent protection has very much in the past been optional. I think with a good agent or good due diligence up front, especially in, I guess, our sort of northwest area, and you know, it has been possible to very much get away without rent protection. Some of the things Lisa talked about earlier on in terms of the process and the timescales that are involved in trying to increase rent or the possession grounds. It's going to be interesting to see how the court and the tribunal systems gear up to cope with this increased demand. All we know now is, you know, you could be looking, you know, at very, very long periods without rent, 12 months or longer. You could be looking at very long periods where you're in dispute, trying to get your property back. And I think for me, again, another thing that's kept me awake at night is, you know, if you as a landlord can reasonably expect to cope without 12 months rent, then that's fine. Rent guarantee is still very much an option. If you can't, you know, because we all know margins are incredibly tight with the tax regimes, if being without rent for even a handful of months is going to cause you a major issue, then rent protection is no longer optional. It's very much mandatory. So preparing for the change, again, this is really just a timeline view of the things Lisa's already talked about. She's already said it: tenancy agreements, rents, compliance, rent protection that I've just talked about, and just stay informed. Things are certain extent set in stone now for May, but I think the big thing is, I guess, that we'll want to share with you is once we know more information around the database and the ombudsman, because I think that is still very much unknown at the moment. So yeah, we'll be
more to follow. As we know more, we'll keep you updated. So just before we wrap up, I thought, it's important to talk about some good news. And I think for local landlords, you'll know this, yields outperform the UK average. If we look at the northwest of England, it looks good. And I think particularly, Chester and some of the hotspots that we've talked about, we're even above that. There are strong tenant demands. There are short void periods, particularly in areas with good network links, of which we are very, very fortunate. And regulation means protection for prepared landlords. It might feel overwhelming, but actually the reason for this is to protect well-run landlords, and to support a stronger market for everybody.
I mean, I've absolutely no doubt that some landlords will exit the market, and we've seen a steady exodus over the last few years. I think the government's desire to drive out unscrupulous landlords, I think this will probably work to a certain extent, but I do think there will be some landlords who are very good landlords who will just give up the ghost, because it will be one piece of regulation or one piece of paperwork too many. Again, without a heavy sales pitch, that is where we come in to help. I think if you are a landlord who is still actively buying, there will clearly be opportunities, maybe to purchase more residential buy-to-let properties as landlords exit, and a lot of good landlords who do exit the market. What I see is many odd times if they want to exit and leave their tenant in place.
Definitely, and buyers want to, because of course it means that they hit the ground running with their tenant, and so we're finding that is happening an awful lot too. What we've also got, which I think is really very interesting, is we've got a sell or keep calculator, and what this will do is it will take key numbers from you. So, the property original price and the sale price now, and it will extrapolate the numbers, and it will show you the impact over 5 years of selling versus keeping. It's very, 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 very good. So if you are on the fence about selling, one option is what John said, selling with a tenant in situ. The other option is to keep and let. But this calculator, I think you'll find really, really helpful.
We've used that personally because when the going gets tough, it's easy to sit and think maybe it's the right option to sell. Sometimes just punching some numbers into that spreadsheet, just certainly where you've got a property that appreciates over time, that's quite a useful reminder of why we probably all got into this in the first place, and why it might be worth persevering in the face of this extra regulation and paperwork. So very happy to share that. It's a very good tool to use.
Yeah. So we've covered quite a lot of ground. Any questions that you've got, please do pop in the chat. I see that we've got some lovely hellos and some people who have to bob away. We will make this recording. Hopefully we will be recording it, and hopefully we'll be able to send it out to you.
There's
not quite sure how, but
quite a few people who couldn't make it tonight and had asked for a recording. So yeah, as Lisa said, I'm sure it's available. A few people in the comments have asked for copies of the slides. Absolutely, that's clearly a given. So yeah, and I think we've got a reasonable turnout tonight, and it's always a bit challenging it's a bit of a balance between being scared about someone asking a difficult question and but let's just see.
There's a question.
The one about slides, and tools, absolutely.
We definitely will.
It'd be great. And again, if we share that tool with you, it'd be great to get your feedback on it as well, because it'd be nice to talk about that next time round on the webinar if people have found that useful.
Great.
Been going 50 minutes. We've not been going too bad. Thought we might rattle through that quite quickly.
Yeah. Well, if you have got any questions, please do send them to John and I. We'd be delighted to help. And if you would like to book your free tenancy compliance review, that's the QR code. So please do feel free to book that in. We'd be delighted to help you with that.
And I guess, that's exactly as it says on the tin. It's no strings attached. It is free. It will run through. We'll use our team to run through where you are today.
Yeah.
Make sure you've got market rent, understand where you are from a compliance perspective. So again, no strings attached. If that's something you'd like us to do, we'll do it. If we can help then identify any areas that you need to tackle before renters' rights does kick in, that's fine. And I suppose there's just also a general invite from Lisa and I, if anybody would like to just come in for a coffee and have a chat. If you're thinking about selling, keeping, you're uncertain, it's difficult to ask questions on this forum, but if you just want to come and meet and have a coffee with Lisa and I, there's an open invite there as well.
Definitely. And there are a few questions there. Thank you, Helen. Yes, we'll talk more. Kate, I shall contact you after the webinar. If rental is fully managed, do I need to be on the landlord database? No, you don't. They're just for self-managed landlords. And Tracy, yes, we'll send that out to you, the recording. Thank you for all your lovely comments, and if you're asking for the keep or sell, we'll sell that out to you as well. And so thank you all, and look forward to speaking with you soon. Hope you found it.
Contact details on there for letting. So I guess if people haven't had a chance to pop anything in there, again, just you can contact us all sorts
Lisa
of different
at curranshomes.co.uk and John at curranshomes.co.uk, and of course you can call us anytime.
Great. Thank you for your time this evening, and we'll see you on the next webinar.
See you soon.